All right. Well, I'd first like to discuss about the big news. It's all basically the one big story out there right now is that the Obamacare repeal failed to pass Congress on Friday. I guess, what is your overall impression about what this means for the Trump administration? Because I know that was one of the big things that Trump ran on was, we need to repeal Obamacare. What do you think it means for the Trump administration? And it seems like, Congress right now, it's set up perfectly for Republicans, but they just can't get this passed. So what do you think it means for the Trump administration and also for, I guess, the Republican Party in general?
Well, I think it was quite a stunning rebuke, I think, to this idea that this party, of course, the GOP, has been, as the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, has pointed out, Elijah, is that they have been a 10-year opposition party. And being against things was easy to do. But actually governing and actually, moving the country forward and protecting the rights of citizens and all of this, this seems to have been kind of on the back burner. Over the last 8 years, it's been, from the GOP, a nonstop gridlock, stop Obama at all costs. And so during the last 7 years, Republicans have attempted to repeal. They voted on repealing Obamacare 60 to 90 times, somewhere in that number. So they've had all of this great success on paper. But whenever it came time to actually govern, they couldn't agree. So after 7.5 years, and you have no consensus on what to do with Obamacare after blabbing about it for 7 years, and I think that's a really stinging indictment. It's also really bad, too, for the Trump administration because the Trump administration has really elevated the hope of investors by talking about future tax cuts, deregulation, and all other manner of pro-business agenda. But the fact that he was unable to work with his own party and that they have a majority on something so obvious. I mean, the tax cuts are going to be much more painful. This should have been a slam dunk. I think that's the big takeaway, Elijah, is that the repeal and replace of Obamacare was told to us that it was going to be a slam dunk. The Democrats expected to see Obamacare. If you told them that this time in 2017 Obamacare would still be around, they said, no, there's no way. You have a majority in both houses. You have the presidency. So how did this fail? It failed through sheer ignorance. It failed through sheer bumbling stupidity. And I think that's a really sad thing for the GOP. But it's also very sad for investors who have kind of bought into this market now. There's a lot of people, Elijah, who trade and invest based upon their politics. And so back in 2009, as we were telling our members that it was time to get back into the market because there was a new massive uptrend forming, most people were worried that Obama was going to, become the Antichrist and destroy America and burn it down and put people in death panels and all of this. So they stayed away from the stock market, and they missed out on 175% in gains during that time. Now that the market is at all-time highs, now that the market is at these stratospheric levels, now the GOP, many GOP investors are taking their money off of the sidelines after missing out on an epic rally, and they're just now putting their money into the market. So it's also bad for them because many of them had high hopes. And I think that this is really going to be a point we'll look back on very possibly and see that this is when the volatility in the market really began to pick up.
Now, what is your perspective on how this might impact, this two-party system? Do you think it's basically just a blow for Republicans, or do you think it could be questioning, this whole two-party system, kind of like the last election, this last election did? People were just fed up with the two choices that they had, between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. A lot of people didn't want to pick either of them, and it really brought into question the two-party system as, a concept that people were saying we need more than two parties. And there were a lot of anti-establishment candidates, for example, like Bernie Sanders and then, Trump and Ted Cruz. So what do you think this the failure of Republicans in this sense, do you think that'll have any impact on the idea that we might need more parties in general, like that general idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what Europe has done for a long time. You have more than just two choices. But, going back to the question, I mean, in reality, Americans did have quite a few choices, albeit in the two-party system, which is not really a choice. But going back just literally, though, they did have like 18, 19 different Republicans to choose from. So those who are all complaining about Trump now should recall that they had a whole stable full of people that they were happy to get rid of. So Trump, the GOP needs to own Trump. He's theirs. They need to own him. Unfortunately, his whole administration now is underneath FBI investigation, and his promises about the things that he was going to do are looking increasingly unlikely. So as far as the two-party system goes, yeah, I mean, I think that's always been a benefit to the corporations. It's always been a benefit to the upper crust. I mean, look, you have about 20% of this country here in America who are kind of considered the upper crust. They're educated. They either have college education or they're managers, or in some way, in some role, they play a leadership role in society, and they're expected to speak out and to do these things. The bottom 80% are the workers. They're the ones who kind of keep the whole thing going, and they're the ones who watch from afar, and they're the ones who the 20% are constantly trying to manipulate through the media and all of this. And so a two-party system, I think, in many ways, it does limit the kind of choices. And I also think that it limits and it creates a barrier to the type of debate. I mean, the things that we should be talking about, the things that we should be debating are not allowed on primetime television. They're not allowed on the presidential debate stages. And so I think because we just have these two parties and no more, that's causing much of the problems that we have today. But again, I mean, it's also much in the structure that we've built, the way that corporations and the media have colluded. It's just it really is quite a sight that we have built, and and we all own it now, and we also all owe debt on it to the tune of $60,000-$70,000 apiece.
I had a viewer send in some questions, and before we get to that, I just wanted to touch on one thing that you mentioned about how the Trump administration is now. I think it was Trump's campaign is now under FBI investigation with respect to ties to Russia. What is your perspective? Because this is another big news thing that's going on and has been going on for months about Trump's ties to Russia, his campaign's ties to Russia, Russian hacking in the U.S. election. Is this more of a distraction, or is this actually a big issue?
Well, it all depends. If this was about Obama, then the right would say that it's a huge issue. If it were true that Obama were under investigation and his administration was under investigation for colluding with the Russians, I think that, you would have a constant ongoing debate. I mean, just think about Benghazi. I mean, how many millions of dollars were spent on Benghazi? We're talking about the White House under investigation for collusion with Russia. Now, let's back up and say that is a big deal, but it's also not a big deal. It's a big deal in the fact that can any of us really recall this kind of investigation in our lifetimes where a sitting president and his administration are under investigation for collusion with a foreign government through their intelligence departments? I mean, I think it is a big deal in that respect, and so it should be pursued. And I think it is right that we should look into these things, just as we would have underneath a President Obama, right? I think those who are clamoring for this to be a nothing burger now are the same people who were telling us that Benghazi was a huge, 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 huge problem. Okay, secondly, I think on the other side of the thing is, the other side of this debate is that it is not really a big deal when you think about it, because the United States has been meddling in other countries' elections for decades. And so the moral outrage that is being expressed today by those on the left and even by some of those on the right, when put in proper perspective, is kind of seen for what it is, and that is that it's a little silly. The moral outrage that someone would actually meddle in our elections I think other countries are kind of thinking to themselves, well, you're going to get what you deserve. This is what we've been doing all over the world for decades.
I'd like to get now to viewers' questions, and the first viewer's question is about hyperinflation. You talked about how, the United States is going into more and more debt, and your book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, really discusses this. What is your perspective on the kind of inflation we're going to see as a result of this? Do you see hyperinflation coming? And if so, how painful is it going to be, and how long will it last?
Well, the hyperinflation is just a reality. It's something that we believe is going to be a reality, not because of some forecast or not because of some date that's looming or something like that. None of those things. The reason why we're concerned about hyperinflation is because the United States dollar is literally everywhere, and we have a massive debt and deficit. We have enemies that are growing all over the world. And we have a very unpredictable presidency now, so that's also complicating things. So as we take a look at the future, we expect to eventually see some sort of decoupling from both the petrodollar system, which is still intact. Let me back up here just for a minute, Elijah. There were some hopes, and again, these are more of the shattered hopes for Trump supporters. But one of the more interesting things that I saw in candidate Donald Trump was the fact that perhaps he was actually going to go after those who were involved in the 9/11 attacks, i.e. Saudi Arabia, according to the 28 pages in the 9/11 Commission report. But in fact, it's turned out to be quite the opposite. There was a lot of tough talk about Saudi Arabia before candidate Trump won. Now that he's President Trump, we've seen quite the opposite. We've seen a reset with Saudi relations. We see this ongoing persecution of the Shiite nation of Iran. Recently, they were ordered, or actually over $1 billion were frozen in Iranian assets by Europe for compensation for 9/11 victims. Okay, so this is Iran, the Shiite-controlled nation who has nothing to do with Sunni Islam, which has nothing to do with Sunni Al Qaeda, which has nothing to do with Sunni, ISIS, and so it's interesting to see that the West is still ignoring the basic things that happened on 9/11. Now, I know there's a lot of different ideas. Some people think it was an inside job. Some people think that Israelis were involved. I understand all of the different theories, but from my own research into the matter, I'm convinced that the Saudi government was involved. And we've had Senator Bob Graham on our program before. We've talked about this at length. I've written extensively on it. And so I think that had that situation blown up into a bigger thing, had Trump actually pushed the Saudis, had he actually pushed that, we could have seen a decoupling from the petrodollar system, and that could have been very devastating. And so that was one thing we had our eye on. It doesn't look like that's going to appear. In fact, it looks like that men and women in the U.S. military will be heading into Yemen, and they'll be heading into Syria, and they'll likely be heading into Iran. So it looks like we're going to be doing a lot more of the Saudi Arabia's bidding using our United States military. And so as far as hyperinflation goes, I think that while that may still be looming, we're seeing a rising of inflation over the last several years. Of course, war is very inflationary. World War I was very inflationary, followed by a massive 500% increase in the stock market. World War II was very inflationary, followed by a huge, maybe 500% increase in the stock market. And then you had the long protracted Vietnam War, which was also followed by a very lengthy uptrend in the stock market. But I think what we could see here underneath a President Trump is war, which is highly inflationary. Now, as far as the question goes of how painful will it be, it's no way to gauge. There's no way to know exactly how it will all play out. But I think the way that you prepare for it is you are nimble and you make sure that you're diversified. So you don't put all your money into any one thing, but you do use concepts like we've created called PACE, a synonym for precious metals, agriculture, commodities, and energy, real estate, hard assets, things of that nature. So, we love real estate. We love affordable, low cost real estate that we can rent out. We love rental real estate. We like gold. We like silver. We like to invest in commodity ETFs. We like to invest in global markets as well. So although we will have, I believe, some pretty bad inflation in the future, I think there are prudent things that people can do to protect themselves, and we talk about that for all of our members at followthemoney.com.
This next viewer is wanting to know, where do you see petroleum prices heading during the Trump administration?
Well, I think that also goes back to the concept of war. I'm not really an oil specialist. I do focus a lot on precious metals and several different sectors, but I'm not really a prognosticator too much on energy. So I'll leave that to the smarter guys in the room on energy. But I would say that oil right now, we've had it in the downtrend for some time. We do uptrend and downtrend alerts on ETFs, and we're waiting for a nice uptrend in oil. We do think that during Trump's presidency that we will see some spikes, no doubt, due to different various issues that are certain to arise over the next 4 years pertaining to the Middle East. We're getting ready to see a ramping up of the battle against ISIS in the Middle East. All kinds of things could happen. All kinds of things could go wrong, and that could send oil prices hurtling higher quickly.
This next viewer is wanting to know, it gets back to the concept that there's this, huge debt bubble and that we're going to see inflation in the near future. They say 99% of the population will just fall for the same old tricks next time and will be on YouTube 8 years from now screaming bubble. So why do you think that this inflation is going to come sooner and that basically the powers that be won't be able to just continue to kick the can down the road?
Well, I mean, that's the question. The markets can remain irrational longer than you and I can remain solvent. That's an old Keynesian quote. And it is true that we could continue down this path. Look, as long as the other parties in this system are willing to go along, then we could keep the game of musical chairs going for some time. I mean, so there is no need for this thing to collapse tomorrow. There is no need for this thing to collapse next year or 10 years from now. I mean, so the point is that we are going to collapse because it's mathematics. So you cannot deny the laws of mathematics. I mean, it's just sheerly impossible to continue on the rate we're going. We're heading towards a brick wall. But the point is that the distance that we are to that brick wall is unknown, and also the speed at which we're traveling to that brick wall can be accelerated by policy or it can be decelerated by policy. So there's too many variables to know exactly when it will happen. So yes, I mean, 8 years from now, we may still be saying that inflation is going to be a problem. That doesn't change the fact of the matter. I mean, we know that there are too many U.S. dollars out there in banks and being held by foreign governments, which if the overall world order changes, those dollar bills will be in less demand. Also, the United States has built its entire economy upon debt, and it needs more debt and more debt and more debt to continue growing. All of this is unsustainable. And even now, and this is another thing too with the political situation, is that it's so important, and I hope listeners listening know that I am apolitical, right? So I do not have a dog in this fight. When I look at Washington, I just see a disaster. I don't see good guys and bad guys. I see a disaster. So I don't have a dog in the fight. But what is interesting, and I think what smart investors and smart traders should be looking at, is how often the narrative changes. So right now, we're getting ready to go into a debt ceiling debate and a budget fight. But this time, because the Republicans are in power, the debt ceiling should be raised. And so now it's the Democrats' turn to begin to get concerned and worried over the debt bubble. And, Trump is going to blow a huge bubble of debt, and he wants to raise the debt ceiling. It's so irresponsible. And so this is just a back and forth dance. This isn't new. Nothing on the news is new. It's all the same thing over and over and over. And so so the media wants us to generate this fake outrage every single day. That's their business model. And so I think for us, we mustn't get so caught up in all of that. We just got to remember the math. The math is on our side. You cannot continue to grow a debt-based economy with more debt forever. And you can't constantly meddle in other countries forever before they finally want to revolt. So I expect war not just in other countries underneath Trump. I expect war here in the United States underneath a President Trump. And all of that will be very inflationary.
All right, moving now to this next viewer's question. They're wanting to know what your perspective is on what percentage mix of total savings would you suggest people have in silver, Bitcoin, gold, and cash? So what combination has the most upside potential and would give people the least risk?
Okay, and you're talking about savings or investing, or savings or investments?
They said total savings.
Total savings. Okay. Well, and we really separate those two. So savings, we would say, is that liquid portion of money that you can deploy in an instant, and that's liquid at all times. And so that's savings. And now investment may be something you lock up. You may buy a rental property, or you may buy, a stock, or you may get involved in some other business. And those things are less liquid. I mean, you can liquefy them if you need to, but the intention is, of course, is not to do that. It's to invest for a purpose. And so leaving all of the investment dollars aside, assuming that we're just talking about the money that's liquid, that's your savings, I don't think I would put much of that at all into Bitcoin because it needs to be stable. So I own Bitcoin. I have owned Bitcoin for many years. I was turned on, fortunately, by my friend Trace Meyer, who came on our program many years ago and told everybody to buy Bitcoin. He was an early adopter. And so, I like Bitcoin, obviously. I mean, it's gone up dramatically. But the thing is that it's very unstable. I wouldn't want to put my savings in something like Bitcoin. Somebody else might want to be my guest. That's not a place where I would want to. I think when it comes to the actual savings, we have developed what we call a diversified 6-month liquid savings reserve. People can find that on our website. Go to followthemoney.com/DSO. And we had a study done on this particular saving strategy where we went back for 20 to 30 years to see how would this have performed. And in essence, what it is it's basically taking your liquid savings and dividing it 3 different ways. 1/3 into U.S. denominated assets, whether it could be like a money market account or a savings account, just something liquid. Another 1/3 into foreign currency. We keep track of foreign currencies on our website, and we alert our members every week to our favorite foreign currencies. And the way we get those is not by going to the airport and buying foreign currency and paying a huge markup. We just buy the ETFs. So we have access to, for example, right now we have been long on the Australian dollar, the Chinese yuan, and the U.S. dollar. And so those 3 have really been kind of at the top of our list for the last several months. And then the third of the 3 parts of your savings would go into a half gold and half silver. That's how we back tested it. So we looked at just investing in stable foreign currency 1/3, half gold, half silver for another 1/3, and then U.S. dollar denominated assets for the final 1/3. And if you back test that for 20 years, you get a much better return than just throwing your money into a savings account. But when it comes to Bitcoin and things like that, again, I think people should go out and actually buy a Bitcoin just to experience what it's like if they can afford it and just have one, especially when it's low. I mean, back when it was trading for around $200 or $300, it was a great time to maybe buy 1 or 2. I think, it behooves us to at least know about that technology, but I wouldn't be putting lots of money into it personally. I would be very, very cautious about that.
All right. Well, Jerry Robinson, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers any last thoughts you had and where they can find you online?
Yeah, well, I would just say just be prepared for some volatility here. We haven't had much volatility in the stock market, and it's been a really nice ride up, especially since the election in November. So I would encourage people to use some extra caution now as we head into some serious concerns with both the looming debt ceiling, the inevitable issues we're going to face with the budget 2018, which is highly unpopular, and several other things that are just laying down the road. I mean, we have the Russia collusion that we mentioned and several other things that have put President Trump's pro-business agenda in jeopardy. So I would just be exercising caution here. And if folks want to find us, they can find us at followthemoney.com. When you go there, you can click on the plans and pricing, and there you can see all of the different services that we provide. One of our most popular services is our Weekend Briefing, which is a PDF that's sent out to all of our members every weekend that includes all of the latest uptrends and downtrends on ETFs that we're tracking. And so it's a really nice way just to kind of stay in the loop. If you just want to trade a little bit, or if you're looking for an ETF that's, forming a new uptrend, or one that, you want to know when to get out of it, we track, 20, 25 different commodities. We track 40 different global markets. We have our top 35 stocks that people can trade. So it's all on a nice PDF delivered every weekend. If folks want to get that, just go to followthemoney.com and click on the plans and pricing to learn more.
All right. Once again, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you, Elijah.
This video was brought to you in part by ReluctantPreppers.com. Click here to watch Reluctant Prepper's latest interview.